read it, look at it, and then change it. That's what we did with the one we found online, and just make it your own. But it'll give you a good idea of all the different ways we navigate it with our kids too.
And then let me also say, mention this service, but I also just want to again mention this is this Maven conference coming up in September is a great resource. In fact, one of the books we recommend is a book called Screens and Teens. And that was a book written by Kathy Cook. And Kathy Cook is going to be at the Maven conference. In fact, we have a teen track. So there's parenting tracks, there's an apologetics track, there's a culture track, but there's also a teen track. And one of the talks is Jonathan Morrow is doing a talk on social media for students. And so I know it is helpful to find allies, right? And so bringing other voices for your teenagers to hear is an important step. So have them come to the Maven conference and say, hey, what do you think about, checking out Jonathan's seminar? I want you to go to it. Tell me what you think about what he says. And then you're getting another voice, another source of authority in front of them, okay? So, and then, definitely take advantage of the discount code. So I wanted to just give you those resources as well. Let me highlight, I think one of the most important things we have to think about when it comes to the
microphone went out.
Did it go out?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
No.
Okay. I think I got to hold it close. Too close. Okay. Think about all of these areas surrounding our kids. So, college athletics. What do we have? We have Will Thomas, right now Leah Thomas, competing in Division I NCAA sports, right? We have social media. I popped up my LinkedIn account. If any of you are linked in, it's more of a kind of a business social media account. Pop that up. It prompts me, right? Add your pronouns. You think about kind of Target, what went on with Target last year and all of the products. You think about the arts and entertainment. I don't know if you know who this is. This is Ellen Page. Very talented actress. She was great in the movie Inception and other movies. Just recently, in the last couple of years, went through a very public transition. Had a double mastectomy, so chopped off healthy body parts. Here's a Wall Street Journal article talking about how U.S. passports offer X-gender markers. So you don't have to put male or female, you can put X. This is just a social media post from a dad saying, hey, here's my son's first grade assignment from yesterday. And it's identifying, the gender with the right pronouns. You've got the gender unicorn that's used in public education. On and on and on. And now notice, we could, of course, put out a million more illustrations, but we put these illustrations out to demonstrate college athletics, social media, business, arts and entertainment, government, education. It is thoroughly infected every institution of our culture. Okay? So our kids are surrounded by it, and what happens is when you're surrounded by this, that's how things get normalized. In fact, when you think about culture, and John and I talk about this in the book, A Practical Guide to Culture. Culture is like this big ocean, and so guess what? If you live in culture, you're going to get wet. We're all going to get wet. And that is actually the most powerful way that culture shapes us. The most powerful way culture shapes you, me, and our kids is simply by presenting to us what is normal. You don't have to make rational arguments and scientific arguments for these things. You just, at every corner, present this as normal. And then people start to believe it, affirm it, and go along with it. And sometimes they won't even believe it. They'll just go along with it to get along because they don't want the heat, right? So there are young people who now they put their preferred pronouns in their bio, not because they thought carefully about that issue, just because everyone else is doing it. And if you don't do it, you're even if someone doesn't come out and explicitly say, oh, what's wrong with you, there's just this kind of quiet pressure that they feel. And so C.S. Lewis puts it this way: the most dangerous ideas in a society are not the ones being argued, but the ones that are assumed. I think this is an important thing to think about when it comes to our kids, whether it's the gender issue or any other issue, or when it comes to technology and social media and smartphones. It's the same thing. Just present it as normal, and then we go along with it. But make no mistake, when you assume a set of ideas, those ideas will play themselves out in certain consequences. And so when we look at LGBTQ identification, when it comes to our young people, what we see is, hey, silent generation, this is probably grandparents, maybe great-grandparents, the baby boomers, grandparents, Gen Xers, parents, some millennial parents, but Gen Z, look at the difference in LGBTQ identification. In fact, I've seen some data that suggests this is closer to anywhere from 30 to 40% now, that our kids are identifying with the acronym on unprecedented levels. Ideas have consequences. If everyone around you is going to normalize this, guess what? You're going to see much more identification with it. And that's why it's so important for us to think carefully through this issue.
Oh, did you want me to go?
I thought you just kind of naturally transition in there.
I didn't know you were going to stop.
I mean, come on. I thought we had this really good chemistry.
They're really seeing the chemistry of our marriage right now.
You should watch our podcast. Oh, yeah, you'll see chemistry.
Okay, so the underlying fundamental question with all the gender chaos that we see going on around us, the question underneath it that we have to answer, and we have to help our young people answer in our homes and in our church, is what does it mean to be male and female? So we talked about what does it mean to be human. This question of identity and culture, as Christians, we need to be able to articulate what it means to be male and female. Because that is the question that the culture is basically screaming at us. And so we want to be able to offer an answer that not only is true, but I think an answer that shows the beauty of God's design. Because being made male and female is good. And being made male and female is beautiful. And so, how is the culture answering this question? Well, there's several lies that we have to unpack when it comes to the culture's answer to this question. And so the first lie that is being put towards our young people is that we decide our own gender. And so with this lie, we decide our own gender. What we have to do is first define some terms, because the culture throws around terms that sometimes maybe we don't know the definition to, or we think, I'm not sure that we see that word the same way that I think of that word. So we have to start with definitions, even to have a conversation about it. So the first term we have to define is social construct. This idea that gender, because this is what is put up in culture, gender is just a social construct. So what's a social construct? Well, social construct is just something that doesn't exist independently in the natural world, but instead is an invention of society. So this is just something that we have come up with as human beings. It's not something that actually exists, whether we believe it or not. Gender is just something we've come up with. So, you want to give that?
Yeah, okay, so here's an example, the kind of video, the kind of message you'll hear on this idea of social construct.
Social construct is an idea or concept that was created.
Okay. We can hear it. Can you hear it?
Just put the microphone to it, or...
Well, you should be able to get the, there we go. Got to turn it to HDMI. Let's try that again.
A social construct is an idea or concept that was created, accepted, and perpetuated in a society, typically subconsciously. Lots of things are social constructs. Nationality, gender, race, age,
Never asked me why.
Like, I'm not a woman. I'm not a lady. I mean, I really love femininity, but all of those are social constructs.
Attitudes towards social constructs change over time. Did you know that pink was once thought of as a masculine color and now it's thought of as feminine? Well, I just think it's that.
Okay, so that's it. That's what your kids will hear. They'll hear this at the university. You know, that the gender is a social construct. Okay, now, so what we want to do, part of what we have to do is we have to help our kids think rationally through these kind of claims. They are made in God's image, and what part of that means is that they're rational creatures. You and I are rational creatures. And even when the culture gets completely illogical, we don't follow their lead. And so we want to critique ideas. And so that's, I think, one of the important steps here. And so we want to say, okay, let's think about this idea of social construct. Is the claim that everything's a social construct, right? So you're saying gender is a social construct, but let's back up. Why is that a social construct? Are there other things that are social constructs? Is everything a social construct? Okay? And so how are they going to answer that question? Because I think what we want to do is hey, let's chip away at that. There are clear case examples where certain things are not social constructs. Is gravity simply a social construct? Meaning that's what we determined. And if we get rid of the idea of gravity, it's just, that's just cultures. It's oppressive cultures that have given us the idea of gravity because they want us to stay on the ground, right? And now if we deconstruct that idea, does that mean we can now get onto the roof, jump off, and we'll be suspended in midair? Right? No. Because gravity is not a social construct. The word, now could we have used a different word for gravity? Yeah, we could have called it popcorn, whatever. That part is a social construct, like the language that you use, but the language is capturing a reality, right? And so why would you think that gender is a social construct? So I think we need to put that burden back on the person making that claim that gender is a social construct. Why would you think that, right? Now, did you notice the video actually gave us some other examples that we can use in kind of, I think, dealing with this ideology, and we'll kind of work on that a little bit more. I think we've got some more slides on that. Okay, but now, so Erin said, hey, first thing, let's kind of define our terms, social construct. All right, here are 4 other aspects of this debate that need some definition. All right, number 1, we need to define this term sex. Sex is either of the 2 main categories, male and female, into which humans and many other living things are divided on the basis of their reproductive function. Okay, so this is the idea that sex is a biological reality. When we use the term sex, we're making reference to the body's way of being organized in respect to reproduction. And I mean, at the most basic level, it's the idea that, male and female gametes are kind of different sizes, right? You got females with eggs and males with sperm. And that is a fundamental biological reality that helps us to make this distinction between male and female, okay? Now, this is often, number 1, biological sex is unchanging. It's unchanging. If you are born male or female, there's nothing you can do to actually change that because it goes beyond just your body parts. And this is something that's almost always immediately obvious. In almost every case, this is immediately obvious. That's why back in the day, before we found out, what the sex of our child was, when the baby was born, you wouldn't have, doctors all around the country going, I don't know. Okay, we're going to have to spend some time figuring this out, right? No, it's either it's a boy, it's a girl, because it's almost always immediately obvious. Why? Because sex is binary. Now, of course, what's the big objection on this one? It's the intersex objection. What about the intersex individuals out there? They seem to be some kind of in-between, right? And don't they represent maybe kind of a third gender? And so here's how I think about the intersex thing. Number one.
Which is actually the issue with the boxer in the Olympics right now, which, I mean, most of you, this is the conversation right now about intersex. So this is important for us to understand, right, the distinction about it. I just want to say, because that's like the thing everyone's talking about right now.
Yeah, and this is the kind of relevant stuff we need to be talking about in the church, because our kids are seeing it and they're talking about it, and if we don't talk about it, then it seems like, well, we in the church don't have anything relevant to say to it, right? Just through our silence. And so what do we have to say about this? Well, yes, of course we would want to recognize there are people who are born intersex. But when you look at the data on this, this is a condition, and there's multiple kind of aspects to this condition. It's not all the same, but there's generally some condition where they are born with ambiguous genitalia. And that could have to do with deformities. That has to do with maybe sometimes the genitalia are up inside the body. There's a number of different ways that this expresses itself. But according to the Intersex Society of North America, there are 0.05% of people who are born with this condition. 0.05%. That means 99.95% of the population are not intersex. They are clearly male or female. And we highlight that because what this represents, the intersex condition represents an abnormal condition. You would say this is an exception. And you don't make rules out of exceptions. You don't say, hey, there's this really small group, and so now we're going to take this exception and extrapolate and create rules for everyone else based on this. Now we can no longer say there are males and females because you have this one ambiguous situation. Well, number one, it's a very small minority of people who deserve our compassion. This is a difficult situation. But even if we were to say, hey, I'm not exactly sure what to do in all those situations. How do we work through it? That's a difficult question. But even if we don't know what to do in those situations, it doesn't mean that we don't know what to do in 99.95% of the situations. So you don't make exceptions into rules. All right, and intersex does not represent a third gender. It's an abnormality. Okay, so that's the first word. Sex refers to biological sex, which is kind of a reference to, in particular, reproductive function. Okay, then you got this other term now, gender. And just so you know, kind of in the history of etymology here, this is a recent phenomena where we've divided these things. Sex and gender used to be synonyms. And I know there's some people who say, well, let's not give in and let's keep it that way. But it's really difficult when kind of everyone in the culture is now kind of using this word in a different way. And so I think we have a way to kind of deal with how this word has changed. So gender now refers to how we identify psychologically and then how we present ourselves to the world as either a male or female. So here's the distinction: sex, biology, gender, psychology. And so this leads us to a third term, third phrase, and that's gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is actually, I think, an important category that we need to fight to maintain. Because there are now people who feel like their sex, their biological makeup, doesn't fit with their psychology, their gender identity. Right? So this is the person who feels like, hey, I am a woman trapped in a man's body, kind of thing. So gender dysphoria is the condition of feeling one's emotional and psychological identity as male or female to be opposite of your sex. Okay? And so, now, here's the key. The one reason why I think we need to keep this category is because there are people who experience gender dysphoria, and they have this discomfort, and they also realize at the same time that that doesn't make them the opposite sex. So, because our culture wants to really kind of get rid of this category. Gender dysphoria sounds like it's a problem. No, it's not a problem. It's just an indication of what you are according to the culture. We want to say, no, actually, I think this does indicate that there's something going on. But there are people who experience gender dysphoria that know that they are not the opposite sex. Okay? But the culture wants to push us to this fourth category, and that's transgenderism. Transgenderism is the view that people are the gender they prefer to be. So, it's the ideology that you are what you claim to be. A transgender boy is a boy, not merely a girl who identifies as a boy. Right? That's why you get this phrase, trans women are women. What are they trying to say with that phrase? They get rid of the trans. Because we are just women. That's what we are. Because in this ideology, you are what you claim to be. Okay? All right. So those are the four terms that are going to, I think, help us kind of map out some kind of clarity on this.
So I think a question we want to ask our culture, our young people, and ourselves is, why do we think that we can or should disconnect gender identity from our body? Why do we think we can do this or we should do this? Because that's the argument in the culture, that we can separate gender identity from our physical body. And so the justification for disconnecting these two, our gender identity and our biological sex, is based on what? It's based completely on feelings, desires, wants, right? And so, feelings, is that a good thing to base decisions on? And do our feelings justify making claims about who we are in other categories? Well, in other categories, it seems like our culture says, no, feelings aren't enough. Let me give you some example. So this lady is named Rachel Dolezal. Dolezal, right? That's how you pronounce it. Did you guys remember a couple of years ago when she was in the news? Okay, some of you are smiling because you remember. So she lived in the Pacific Northwest. Her friends believed she was a black woman with a passion for African American issues. She was a vocal civil rights leader who later became the local NAACP president in Spokane, Washington. Okay, so this was Rachel's life. Well, a couple years ago, a picture of Rachel when she was in high school came out. And this was Rachel in high school. And then what came out is that these are Rachel's parents. So the question is, did the culture say, okay, Rachel felt like she was African American? Rachel obviously is not from African American descent. But Rachel feels like she is. Is that enough to change reality based on Rachel's feelings and for her to say, I am a black woman? The culture said, no, it's not. And Rachel was kicked out of the NAACP. All of her leadership positions were stripped from her. And the culture said, no, we don't care how you feel. What matters actually is your biological reality. So with the issue of race, our culture says, no, feelings don't matter. What matters is reality. Let me give you another example where the culture says, no, reality matters. That's in the area of plastic surgery. Of course, most plastic surgeon patients are women, over 90%. Now, when us women go under the knife and get plastic surgery, and maybe we look like we're 25 when we're really 55, does that change the biological reality of our age? Well, no, of course not. Plastic surgery doesn't change reality. You might feel like you're 25 again, but biologically you're 55, and no amount of plastic surgery is going to change that. The last example, and I think one of the most important examples, is the area of body image struggles. And I had a lot of friends that struggled with this in high school, and that's the issue of anorexia. So let's take a 90-pound teenage girl who struggles with anorexia. So what does that mean? She's thin, but she sees herself as grossly overweight. So she doesn't see herself the way she actually is. So what do we say to the anorexic girl when she goes to the doctor? Does the doctor say, "You feel overweight? You're right. We'll do surgery, we'll do diet drugs, we'll do all these things"? No, the doctor says, okay, you need help because you need help matching how you feel, how you think about yourself with the reality of how you are physically. And we don't put her under the knife. We get her help in the area of psychology, in the way she's thinking about herself. And we don't affirm her misunderstanding of who she is and how she really is biologically. We don't cater to her feelings. We actually tell her, no, your feelings are wrong. And we want to help you change your feelings. And so, in other areas, our culture seems to have clarity, but when it comes to the issue of gender, there just is no clarity.
Yeah, given that last example, think about it. When this situation with gender dysphoria and transgenderism, this is the only situation where you can actually self-diagnose and then go into the doctor, tell him your self-diagnosis, and then he will prescribe action based on your self-diagnosis. Like if I went into the doctor and say, you know what, I've been feeling bad, and I had my wife check me out, she says I got cancer. Let's go ahead and set up chemotherapy and radiation. Doctor's not going to go for that, right? But if you go in and say, you know what, I feel like I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, what are they going to do? They're going to buy your self-diagnosis and then treat you. In fact, and do things that will actually, they will give you cross-sex hormones, and they will take you down a path where eventually maybe you'll mutilate healthy body parts, and you'll do things to your body that cannot be reversed. Just pause and take that in for a second. How have we gotten to this place? If you want to know how we've gotten to this place, read a book called Strange New World. Strange New World by Carl Trueman. Okay. In fact, in the kind of the beginning of the book, it's a condensed version. If you're really academic, read The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self. That's his kind of thick version of that. But he condensed it for normal people like us. And just read Strange New World. You get the footnotes or the cliff notes. But he basically says, hey, I wrote this book because I wanted to figure out how do we get to a place where the statement, I'm a man trapped in a woman's body, is actually coherent. Okay. All right. I'm going to cover this one quickly. This is what you hear all the time in the gender identity discussion, is that if you don't go along with the transition, if you don't go along with that young person who's struggling with their gender, you are going to lead them to kill themselves. They're gonna commit suicide. They're gonna do things to harm themselves. And so you've got to go along with this. This is one of the key tools that secular ideology will use to manipulate parents to go along with this. Because who loves their kids more than the parents?
Yeah.
And who is the last person who wants to see harm come to their kids? The parent. And so if you tell the parent that if they don't go along with this, if they don't affirm their kid in the transition, this is going to lead their kid possibly to suicide, wow, you've got a powerful tool to manipulate parents into going along with this.
A powerful example of this, in case you didn't see it, just a couple weeks ago, Elon Musk was interviewed by Jordan Peterson. Elon Musk, creator of Tesla and now owns Twitter, all that. Him. Neither one, Jordan Peterson nor Elon Musk, are Christians. Jordan Peterson interviewed him, and it's a very hard part of the interview to watch, but Elon Musk talks about how his son went through this, and he was told, if you don't go along with it, he will commit suicide. And Elon Musk shares his story. I was dumbfounded how honest he was about it, but it gives you a picture into how parents are manipulated to go along with this out of their deep love for their children and out of being promised that this will help their children to be happy. And so if you want to, I wish we could like all watch it together, but Google that and even that part, watch that video. It's a powerful thing to watch and to help you understand and have sympathy for families who are going through this and the lies that they are being told.
Yeah. Okay, now here's what the data shows, and I'm just going to kind of summarize this, okay? It's basically transitioning does not lead to wholeness. And now we have more data. In fact, I was just thinking, Erin, you and I need to update this slide because there's more data that shows, okay, we've got more folks who we can measure this with who have gone through medical transition. And we can look and see, all right, what are the outcomes? And the outcomes are that the rates of suicide do not go down whatsoever. They don't go down whatsoever. In fact, other data tells us that if you just leave a kid alone who's got gender dysphoria, you don't do therapy, you don't do anything, you just leave them alone. 80 to 95% of children with gender dysphoria will naturally grow out of it. Okay? And yet what do? You got gender dysphoria? Oh, let's get you on this track that will trap you in it. And so here's, I think, one of the most powerful things we can do to kind of dispel this lie that transitioning leads to wholeness is or listen to the detransitioners. One of the best things you can do to show I think to kind of try to inoculate your kids against these harmful ideas is show them the stories of detransitioners, people who have gone through it already and now on the other side are saying, don't do it. This is a gal, her name is Prisha Mosley, and this is the first video she made. She is making a lot of news because she is, I believe it's in the state of Virginia. She's brought a lawsuit against the hospitals and doctors. And I'm hoping that that legislation will slow this train down. That's one thing that could really put a chill on this. And that would be a great news for young people. But listen to Prisha talk about her own struggle with gender dysphoria and kind of what she was taken through.
I ruined my life. When you break it down, I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I had ever even experienced being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child. And now I feel like I will never entirely know. I want to say that I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity, and my doctors knew this. I told them, even though they didn't ask, that I had been diagnosed with BPD, and it was all fine to them. I wasn't happy as a girl, so that meant I was boy and I was trans, and so I just took the cure that was handed to me. I was told that I was being given a cure, and I wouldn't want to kill myself anymore. And it wasn't true. I didn't want to cry in this video, but this is such a hard thing to talk about. I lost a lot of things to this, and I just hope that anyone else who's going through what I went through as a young girl will not be prescribed hormones and surgery because of other things. You know, there are so many mental health disorders that make you hate your body, and the solution isn't to change your body, it's to fix your brain, you know. I just don't want anyone else to ever feel this way. I lost my voice, I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm gonna be around kids. I feel like no one wants to date me or love me because I'm ruined.
So it's heartbreaking to watch that. And of course, we know she's not ruined, actually. And that's why these kids need truth. And that's what, as the church, we have to offer them. That she's not actually ruined, that she's not without hope, that the God who made her loves her, and she knows she was sold a lie. And so this is why this issue matters, and this is why knowing about it and talking to young people about truth and not just affirming how they feel in the moment is so important, because we have hope to offer them. And so I know that was hard to watch. It's hard for me to watch every time, but I hope that motivates us to reach out to these students and families with truth and to not just go along with what the culture is doing and to stand up for kids like this.
Yeah, and this is, I watch this and I hope that this should motivate you to get in the fight. Mm-hmm. Christians sit on the sidelines and they don't want to get into the mess. I get that. But you want to love your neighbor? This is one important way we can love our neighbors. Because if we don't battle this in the culture, then we will simply let the culture take these kids and do more harm to them that can never be reversed. And so sometimes loving your neighbor, it means fighting for them and for their good and fighting for legislation. This is why we would encourage Christians to be involved in the political process as well and be involved in institutions, because those can be really important ways that we love our neighbor and to love young people like this, okay? All right, we'll get to a couple of practical things here, then maybe we'll try to open it up for some Q&A here, okay? Number one, real practically, what can we do with our own kids in our own churches, in our own homes? Number one, teach that our body is good and teach that our gender is good. And from very early ages, we now have to be explicit in this with our kids. You got little ones? You should be reminding them that the way God made them is really good. Because what transgenderism is doing is teaching them to hate their body. Teaching them to hate how God has made them.
I know we want to get to questions, so you want to skip a little bit of this, or you want to go there?
Oh, we got to do this one.
So, okay. Okay, so this is where I think, as Christians, we need to talk about how the differences are good, and oftentimes the differences are self-evident. Okay, so here's an example, and Brett and I give this example when we talk to students too. Okay, so we have 5 kids. We have 3 girls and 2 boys. And so one night at the dinner table, Brett said, "Do you want to pray?" And our child said, "Yeah, I'll pray." And so this was the prayer, word for word, from one of our children. "Dear Lord, give the superheroes strength in the movies, and for our family to be strong to punch the bad guys and the trolls." I don't know where that came from. "And for us to get an axe. Amen."
And just so you know, as soon as he prayed that, I got my
You
phone
just
out.
gave it away.
Oh, sorry. Well, no,
Use
they
the
know. They're
pronoun.
laughing. They know.
But we're supposed to say, okay, the audience, who do you think said it? One of our girls or one of our boys? One of our boys. Of course, this was our 3-year-old son, Jonah, who said that. Now, is it possible that one of our girls could have prayed? Of course. We're not talking in totalities. We're talking in generalities. When I read you a prayer like that, you know that it was one of our sons who said that prayer. And so laughing about it, enjoying that, understanding, oh yeah, it's pretty self-evident that there are differences between boys and girls, and loving those differences and thinking those differences are good and not poo-pooing them. Do you want to? Okay.
This one?
So in the church, and this is, I think, key, especially when you're talking to young people, is being careful that we talk in generalities and that we don't fall into American stereotypes of boys and girls. Okay, this is especially important with young people. So, for example, when I am talking to young people, I was recently talking to groups of junior hires, and I said, boys in the room, if you don't like football and blowing stuff up and wrestling and all these other things, good news, you're still a boy and nothing's wrong with you. And just because in American culture most boys like these things, nothing's wrong with you because you don't. And if you're a boy who likes art and likes music and likes gymnastics, good news, you are a boy who likes those things, and there's not a thing in the world that's wrong with you. And the same with girls. And I'll say to the girls in the room, if you don't like makeup and watching chick flicks and going shopping and all the stereotypical American things, that's okay. If you like fixing the truck with your dad and going fishing with your brothers, good news, you're still a girl and nothing is wrong with you. And that's what I mean by being careful about generalities and stereotypes. And we don't, especially in the church, want to stick kids into stereotypical things and say, if you don't fit here, then something's wrong. We are going to push them to the secular culture that says, yeah, something is wrong. You're in the wrong body.
And that leads us to a big lie from the culture on this. The culture says, here's the lie, there is a gender spectrum. There's a gender spectrum. Now, the most effective lies always contain truth, don't they? And so guess what? Here's the truth. There is a spectrum, but it's not a spectrum of gender. There is a spectrum of masculinity and a spectrum of femininity. All right? So, as we talked about, think of it this way. You got your more sensitive boy, and he likes dance or gymnastics or art, right? And all the way to your more rough and tumble boy who likes the sports and the blowing things up and to wrestle all the time. And that's the spectrum. But it's not a spectrum of gender. It's a spectrum of masculinity. And guess what? Wherever you are on that spectrum, you're still a male. You're still a boy. And so this is why it's really, just really practical for us who are dads. If you're a dad and you're a rough and tumble boy, right? And you have a more sensitive boy, you might have some more difficulty relating to him. You're going to have to work harder to relate to him. And you need to make sure that you don't castigate him and say, oh, you're kind of acting like a sissy, boy, right? You do that kind of stuff, you're going to nudge him right to the culture. No, you want to affirm his masculinity. And same with girls. When it comes to girls, you've got a spectrum of femininity. You got the girly girl who loves the makeup and the dolls and all that stuff. And then you got tomboys, which is, our culture wants to get rid of that category because that just means you're a male trapped in a female body. No, we want to keep that category. So those girls who, fish, work on cars, all that good stuff, guess what? It doesn't matter where you are in that spectrum, you're still a girl. You're still a female, and that is God's design for you. And so that's where that kind of helps to protect us from the stereotypes. There's generalities, but don't let them fall into stereotypes. Okay. All right, here's the biggest thing, I would say.
And then we'll do some
And then we'll do
questions.
Q&A. Because we hear parents and churches who will say, okay, what do we do about this? If my kid starts going down this road, and we have talked, I mean, I think many times when we give this talk, we'll have parents who will come up and say, yeah, my 12-year-old is starting to identify non-binary. And I've got, at one of the churches, it was an older dad whose 25-year-old son was now transitioning. And he was just heartbroken, okay? So now if you've got kids in your home under your authority and they start going down this path, what do? Here's our advice. You fight for your family. You fight for your family, and here's your homework. Do a Google search for this article and read this article. It's entitled, What I've Learned Rescuing My Daughter from Her Transgender Fantasy. And I'd say this mom here, she's writing under a pseudonym, she gives us kind of the pattern that we need to take, where she did not go along with all of the things her daughter wanted her to go along with, or what the educational experts wanted her to go along with, or the medical experts. No, what she ended up doing was fighting for her daughter and helped to rescue her from that. And so that, you read that and you'll say, hey, this took a lot of courage. And it was not easy, and her daughter was not happy with her at first, but because she loved her daughter, which means you don't just affirm, love is not just affirmation, it's a commitment to the good of someone else. And sometimes they don't know their own good. That she was able to help rescue her daughter from transgenderism. So I'd say, man, that's one big piece of advice. Don't be passive on this, because you need to start looking down the road. If your kid's heading down this trajectory, you need to start thinking that what are the possibilities? Oh, the possibilities are cross-sex hormones, it's surgeries, it's body mutilation, it's sterilizing themselves, never being able to have kids for the rest of their lives. It's lots of pain and suffering. And we love our kids too much to let them go down that road without a fight, right? And so, okay, let's pause. We've covered a lot of ground, and again, there's only so much time. This is just a start, and we'll give you more resources. In fact, again, if you sign up for the email list, we'll send these slides, and then we've got a bunch of slides with different resources for you to read on, okay?
I just want to say one resource that I absolutely love is, well, okay, I guess Brett's book, I'll say that. Okay,
Oh,
anyway.
Thanks,
One
honey.
book specific, well, they do cover gender in the book, but I was just going to say this book, Secure Daughters, Confident Sons by Glenn Stanton. He works at Focus on the Family. He's a social scientist. I love this book on appreciating the differences between men and women and then communicating that to your kids. If you want to grow in your appreciation of the opposite sex, like when I read this book, I started to appreciate Brett and my boys more, actually.
Well, maybe
like
you
the
should
more
read it again.
I'm trying to appreciate you. No, but I read the book, and then like he gives like questions and stuff to ask, and it was so fun because there were, and actually one of the times we did it, our next door neighbor was over too, so I asked him, and so I was just asking these questions, and it was just so fun to hear their answers. And anyway, it continues for me. It helps me to continue to grow in, I think, what is not natural in us appreciating the opposite sex. Because what we appreciate is me. Like, I get why I think the way I do, and that makes sense to me. And I don't get why he thinks the way he does. And so there's kind of just this natural battle of the sexes that has kind of gone on from, I don't know, the beginning of humanity. Have you noticed? And so we want to see the beauty of God's design, and this book was one that helped me to do that as just a resource.
Yeah.
And then Brett and I have done a bunch of podcasts on this topic of gender and sexuality in the culture too. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, All right, that's a lot of ground to cover. It's kind of been like drinking out of a fire hydrant today, right? Okay, any questions that, and try to make it concise, and we'll try to get through a couple.
Okay. About the fact that you divided, the boys that are more sensitive and they're more inclined to fine arts, for example. It's because their brains are developed differently. They have part of the brains are stronger and they're different. So the girls that are more risky, they say that little boys and all that, it has to do with their brains and their social, the people they're socialized. Maybe they're closer to the father.
Yeah, okay, so is there a question?
No, I'm just.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, here would be my warning, though, on that kind of explanation. We do not want to reduce everything to the physical, because our view, the Christian worldview, says we are not just body, but we are body and soul. And so now I would say that the body and the soul interact dynamically, and so a damage in the brain or brain chemistry or things like that could certainly have an impact. But we want to be careful that we don't just dismiss it to all genetic causes and just kind of reduce it to genetic causes that we somehow don't have control over those things. That's some of the ideology that can lead to. So absolutely, how we're made can certainly have an impact.
And you mentioned culture too, and I think this is an important one to talk about with our kids. I mean, some of the greatest musicians and artists and dancers of all time are men. But today, if men like painting, they're really women in men's bodies. Like, I don't get, that. So really, actually, transgenderism, this whole movement really is rooted in these ugly stereotypes, actually. So I think, talking about culture and how that shapes us is important, because you can say, well, actually, it used to be this way. And now they're telling us this. So it is good to talk about culture and how that shapes us and how we view all these things. And it helps to reveal, oh yeah, our culture really does have this stereotype, and that doesn't make sense.
All right, other questions? That means that we explained everything crystal clear.
Perfectly.
Okay, all right.
Well, why don't you want to adjourn, and then we'll just hang out and talk through things more? You want to do that?
In all of this, we'll close with this, right? This can be a real challenging issue, especially if it affects you and your kid. And so we need to make sure that we never despair in the battle. Whether it's the issue of gender identity, whether it's trying to help our kids navigate technology, whatever the issue is. Not only is it a bad strategy to despair, but it also isn't consistent with our Christian faith that says, hey, 2,000 years ago, Jesus rolled away that stone. And there's no contemporary challenge that puts him back in that grave. And so the risen Jesus will continue to bring about his kingdom on this earth and will ultimately bring it to completion. And so we know there's a happily ever after at the end of this, so we always hope, never despair. And so in all of this, we're praying, we're fighting, we're working, but we're doing so in very hopeful ways. Amen? Amen. All right. We'll hang out here. I'll let Eric finish it up here.